So this really is a message for Democratic women and non-Christian nationalist women, okay, that are Republicans, okay? It's about the SAVE Act, so try to hear me out. I know it'll be harder for Democratic women to hear me out because you see the Christian nationalist as the enemy. I do too, but I'm a Christian, so understand something. The Christian nationalists are not Christians. They're control freaks. They are obsessed with the crusade, era, and they're sick and twisted. As much as I see Democrats on your far lunatic side as sick and twisted. But for the women that can somehow come to the middle just a little bit on the Democrat side, hear me out. You weren't the curse of the earth. You don't have to believe the Bible, but just hear me out, okay? Because it's logical here. Man was curse of the earth. God said it to Adam and he said it to Cain. It's very clear in the Bible. It's literally, he says it. Never told Eve. But the Christian nationalists live on their distortion and their sick, twisted minds of that Eve was the problem, okay? So I've said the war is ultimately against God, but it's against women. Now, the SAVE Act. The SAVE Act is it makes for women to vote, especially if you've been married, divorced, any of this stuff. It's like the amount of work you're going to have to go into with the IDs you need. It's like becomes a poll tax, okay? Now, before you start, and Donald Trump is pushing this heavily, okay? Again, Donald Trump's being used for something. So this is what I would say, okay? And I'm not happy with Donald Trump right now. I'm not. But God's using him for something, to be a mirror to the world. That's what I keep saying. He's pushing it heavily for some reason. It's not because he wants to hurt women. It's because God has always protected women because you haven't been the curse. No women had anything to do with nailing Jesus to a cross. No woman had any decision making in that. But Christian nationalist stupid men like Doug Wilson, who aren't Christian, Pete Hegseth, who aren't Christians, not true Christians, they're lunatics. They're absolute lunatics. Okay? Jesus came, raised women back up to equal status. It's very clear. If you want to come into union with my Father, we need to be back up to equal status. The Christian nationalist men, they fear women, they're afraid of women. I think many of them are closeted homosexual, quite frankly. They just act like, oh, I'm tough. Doug Wilson, perfect example of this. Yet he has a lot of power and influence in Washington. Okay? Why does he have a lot of power? Because that's the way God wants it right now. Because in a way, God will protect women. Because God knows that you are the gender. And I know all of the churches would say, this is totally counterintuitive. No, none of you want to surrender. So until you all want to surrender, God's not even talking to you. You just, go by words in a book. So, God is really trying to protect women. Because what have I been saying? The exercising of the free will was always what the curse is. So can you see how if it make it harder for women to vote, it may seem like, well, how dare you say that? No, I try to look at the bigger picture. Just try to look at because it won't stay that way. What I'm really getting at is it's a trap that God will pull all the Christian nationalist men into and all the Christian nationalist women that support that, like Allie Beth Stuckey. It is a trap that God will place for them. So I don't like the SAVE Act either because of all of the steps it makes women go through. However, I do look at everything through a biblical lens. And so if you try to look at it on a bigger scale, God's trying to protect you, not because the exercising of the free will is the curse. And since women never took part, the reason, like all these Christian nationalists, they hate empathy because they're sick and twisted people, okay? I mean, Pete Hegseth, Doug Wilson, Allie Beth Stuckey, they sound good on TV. They sound like, oh, we all know what we're talking about. Charlie Kirk was like this. They're sick and twisted, okay? Their mind just isn't right. The train doesn't go all the way to the station. They use God. God knows that they use him, and God is going to entrap all of them. So you pass it, and then it traps all of them. So you give all of the people that God knows are truly against him, and those people would be against women. You give them a seat at the table in Washington. You give them a bunch of influence in Washington. You give Paula White, Doug Wilson, Pete Hegseth, all these seats at the table, and then they can say, yes, well, we're the ones that have the influence. But God ultimately has the influence. So he's trying to protect women, because ultimately he'll use it as a net to take all of them and throw them into the bottomless pit with Satan. I know Democrat women who hate Christians would be like, you're crazy, woman. No, just try to just look at the bigger picture, because women were never the curse. Eve sinned, but so did Adam. It was Adam and Cain that were told that they would curse the earth. It was man that stuck a crown of thorns on Jesus' head. Women had nothing to do with it. The biggest threat was that Jesus came and brought women up to equal status. The church didn't like that, nor the state. I mean, I know it's not all men are like that, but that's a lot of what the Christian nationalists are at war at. So when they're at war with women, they're at war with God. So ultimately what I'm trying to say is it's a trap that God is laying. People would say, God doesn't lay traps. No, he just lets people lay their own traps, and then he gets you in the snare of your own nonsense. So just try to look at the bigger picture. It's a way for God to trap all of the false prophets that have all this influence in Washington. Mark my words. It comes from a higher place.